first of all, I want to thank Pam and everybody for hosting me, and everybody who worked hard to put this event together. I'm honored to be here. I've never been to Asheville before, and I've been having a great time. So if anybody has any suggestions for maximizing that and making meaning in my visit to Asheville, I have an entire day free tomorrow, so I'll take advice later. Also, in terms of making meaning, I know that this event has been going for a while this afternoon, so if your brain is a little tired, feel free to tune me out, because it's really the local entrepreneurs that you should care about most, because it's an amazing community that is already here and that can be built further. So that notwithstanding, my name is Michael Wilkerson, and I'm the CEO of a company called Own Your Own Boda. And a Boda is a motorcycle taxi in Uganda. So does anyone here ride a motorcycle or own a motorcycle? All right, wow, that's like the highest percentage I've ever had in my audience. And has anybody else ever ridden one as a taxi? You know, there's a few countries. All right, great. So that'll make things a lot shorter then. I started working in Uganda as a journalist. My background is in journalism, working on human rights and corruption, and sticking authority in the eye with a sharp point. And it turns out that motorcycle taxis are really great for that, because you don't have to wait in traffic jams and you can do everything faster. So I started working in Uganda, but my story really begins with connecting with another young man my age named Mehdi. And Mehdi is a Ugandan man who dropped out of school when he was 16. His father died when he was even younger, and by the time he was 16, his mother was having a hard time keeping him and his two younger siblings in school. So like a lot of young people in Uganda, Mehdi dropped out of school and started working to try and earn money to keep his younger siblings in school and help out his mom. And in Uganda, where 70% of the population is under 25 and youth unemployment is high, Mehdi did what a lot of young men are doing these days and started riding a motorcycle taxi. Now, it turns out that that's actually a pretty good job, because you make money every day, you get to ride a motorcycle around, you're your own boss, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And it turns out that of the tens of thousands of motorcycle taxi drivers in Uganda, a vast majority do not own their own motorcycle. They rent. They're paying rent to kind of a bike landlord every week. And that means that they only take home $3 or $4 a day after paying for the bike and paying for the fuel. So I met Mehdi because he worked right outside of the local newspaper that I started out working at in Uganda, and he was a really nice guy. You know, as a white guy in Uganda, sometimes you're negotiating for things and people give you this ridiculous price because they're hoping it's your first day in the country and you're just going to help them win the lottery, so to speak, that day. But Mehdi didn't do that. He gave me a fair price and he drove safely. And as those of you who've ridden motorcycles know, you can kind of tell when you're on the back of a motorcycle with somebody how good of a driver they are based on how fast your heart rate is. And Mehdi kept it pretty low. So that was the summer when I was 19. So if you want to hear about how I got to Uganda at 19, I'd be happy to tell you later. But the bottom line is I met Mehdi, we were both 19, I helped him set up an email account, and we stayed in touch. I returned to Uganda a few more times over the course of my undergraduate degree and met up with Mehdi the summer before my senior year of college. And he took me to go have lunch with his mom in her village, about an hour from the capital city of Kampala. And Mehdi showed me a house, small, one brick, uninsulated, no running water, no electricity, but a house that he had built for his mom. And the pride was just oozing out of him. And the reason he was able to build his mom a house, besides just supporting his siblings' school fees, was because another loyal customer of his helped him own his own motorcycle. So once he was the owner, he didn't have to pay anybody for that bike every week, and he was able to use his savings to help out his mom. So that's where our company started from. And I returned to Uganda full-time after finishing college, doing journalism, and I checked in with Mehdi, and as it turns out, he was about to finish his second motorcycle. And so at that point, my housemate, who was also a journalist, and I said, hey, we've got a little bit of savings. Why don't we buy some motorcycles? Hey, Mehdi, what's the interest rate like? Oh, my goodness. It turns out that the interest rate for loaning motorcycles to motorcycle taxi drivers is 48%. So we said, that sounds great. Sign us up. Because it turns out that nobody else is giving these kind of loans. Motorcycle taxi drivers, Boda drivers, are considered a high-risk demographic. And our well-educated Ugandan friends said, don't do this, they're going to steal the bikes. You can't trust these guys, they're ruffians. Well, luckily for us, they were wrong. So we bought a few motorcycles, Mehdi helped us choose other people besides him, and we started collecting weekly payments. So my company grew from that to have now distributed over 75 loans, motorcycle loans, and we've already had over 30 people become owners of their own Boda. So that's where the company started, and we just kept reinvesting, and now this is my full-time job, and it's incredible, and I couldn't have done it without support from people like my parents who didn't try and stop me when I decided to move to Uganda. But I also couldn't have done it without Mehdi. And I think one of the most important things to think about is not only why social impact, but just an attitude of why not. Because I think what's common about everybody you just heard talk is the attitude of seeing a problem, and instead of thinking about all the things that could go wrong, just thinking about why not. So for us, the why not was, why not trust these motorcycle taxi guys? They're just trying to help their families. They just want to own their own tools for their own job. And it worked. So I'm happy to answer more questions about the details later, but I just want to conclude by telling you a little bit more about our impact and then talking about my experience at the Unreasonable Institute as a possible example for the tremendous things that can happen going forward here in Asheville. So when our guys own their own motorcycle, it's more than just increasing their income. And in fact, it does more than double their take-home income once they become owners. But we did a survey of our first 25 completed loans and asked the guys, okay, now you're an owner, what are you spending the money on? And they told us that they had built 7 new houses, started 9 new businesses for themselves or their families on the side, and paid more and better school fees for 31 kids. So that's what people are spending money on. And this is with a tremendously high interest rate business. And the reason we've been able to grow from 15 motorcycles to start over our first year to more than 70 distributed is because we said, look, the market supports this interest rate. It turns out to get a home equity loan in Uganda is more than 30%. So we kept the same interest rate, but we reinvested the profits. And we've driven our growth by reinvestment. And you can see the impact. And we have people coming back for second and third loans. And with no marketing whatsoever, we have a waiting list of over 30 people. So I'm moving back to Uganda full time. I'm here visiting my family and raising some investment. And we're hoping to expand to several hundred motorcycles by the end of the next year. And then to come back for another round of financing so we can get to thousands and tens of thousands, not just in Uganda, but in the region and possibly even beyond Africa. So that's what we're doing, and I just want to tell you very briefly about the Unreasonable Institute, because I came to do that. It's a 6-week boot camp for social entrepreneurs, and it really is a boot camp. I've rarely been as sleep deprived, but I've also rarely been as happy about it. And that took place in Boulder, Colorado from mid-June to the end of July, and 25 social entrepreneurs like myself lived together in a fraternity house. Which was always a goal of mine that I accomplished late. And we worked on our projects, but we had workshops. Mentors and investors came through the house, many of them from out of town, and would actually live with us in the house for a few days. And at the end, we pitched to investors, and it was incredibly powerful as an experience. Now, I was successful on the investment side. We've locked in some angel investors, and we're talking to more. But the most valuable part of it was the community. Because yes, there was the head of user experience from Google who came through for a few days, but some of my best mentors, and as it turns out, my eventual investors, were people from the Boulder and Denver, Colorado community who were excited to be involved with something like the Unreasonable Institute that had meaning. Yes, there is definite social impact. But also, had people who were excited about doing something and making sure that it works. Because most people here have probably donated to some kind of charitable campaign over time. And it's easy to do that. It's easy to say, hey, just $5, man, and you can help starving children in Uganda. Well, you can, but I'm here to tell you it's a lot more fun to do it when you don't have to ask for money over and over again. We hope that we can make our company continue to be profitable and reach millions of people without having to come back every year and say, please donate to own your own Boda. And I think that through things like the Mycelium School and some of the other initiatives you've heard about, that impact can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be in Uganda. I happen to love Uganda because I accidentally went there when I was 19, but it can happen right here. And so I would encourage you to check out the Unreasonable Institute. There are videos of the other fellows talking like me, many of them with a little bit more polish. And they're doing incredible things, many of them in the United States. So once again, thank you for listening. Feel free to ask any of us questions, and do prioritize the Asheville people. They're awesome. Thank you very much.
We're going to open this comments, and particularly this notion that Michael just led of what's possible here in Asheville. What can we do given all of this that we've just heard and what you all know? I mean, I'm sure each of you have your own stories. So both what's possible here in Asheville and also if you have questions for any of our entrepreneurs and investors up here today. Yeah.
The original funding for the Unreasonable Institute.
So the Unreasonable Institute as a boot camp works, it's basically funded by the entrepreneurs who come through. So they have a few foundations and corporate sponsors like HP, but the operating costs come from me, come from people like me. So once you're a finalist, you have to crowdsource $10,000 for the tuition, which is hard because I don't like asking for things from people. And it's designed to be on an even playing field so people who don't have a rich uncle can get in. So it starts out with a limit of $10 per week, and then 20, and then 50 per donation. And so that's it's a really good test, as it turns out, of who is really serious about this, who's really willing to dedicate their life to this crazy idea that they have. Because going around and asking people to donate money so you can go to some weird boot camp in a college town in a fraternity house can be a hard sell. But if you love what you're doing, it's not. And so that's where their annual operating budget comes from. And the reason that they did it that way, I was really skeptical at first because I'm from Colorado, and someone told me that and said you should do this. And I was like, oh yeah, they want me to give them $10,000? I don't think that's the point. But it also allows it to be scalable. So they're hoping to have unreasonable institutes around the world, not just in Colorado, going forward. And they won't be in the same way that as a social entrepreneur, I care more about my social impact than my profits, but without the profits, I can't be independent. And so they're on the same principle. They want to be able to open up more institutes without being reliant on external funding. So that's how that works. Sorry, that was really long.
Other questions or comments?
So the name of the event is Unleashed Impact. And I'm curious from some of the local folks, if it hasn't been addressed yet, up until now, what's been leashing the impact in Western North Carolina that you see this helping to unleash, or you see trends and interest from people that started to unleash impact? I mean, what had leashed to begin with, if you know?
I don't think it has been leashed, really. I think Asheville is amazing in what is available here to unleash impact. And I think it's already been happening, and it is happening all the time. I think one of the hurdles right now has been the recession. And that's made it harder and harder to unleash as much impact as people might want to unleash. But I think that we are so fortunate in this area to have an amazing community of people working to make this happen. And it's real exciting to see all this other stuff that could happen. I mean, and Kiva Zip is coming to Asheville, and all this stuff is happening. And I think that people who live here don't realize how lucky that is, how unusual that is. I mean, yeah, Asheville is not normal. We knew that already, but I mean, in this area too, it is not. It's an exceptional community for making things happen. So that's my opinion.
Brian wanted to add things to you.
I think that's a great question, and I think that a lot of what the leash is a lot of times is ourselves. But even though there are organizations that are doing a lot to help funding, it's still getting funding when we need it is still a real challenge. And certainly for the Boggs Collective, that is the biggest leash that we can see right now is enough funding to move us to the next level, particularly within our marketing. But that's the biggest one.
I would also add that while we have so many wonderful things here in Asheville, and we get, the top 10 destination for restaurants and mountains and this and that, there's a lot of parts of our communities that don't have enough to eat, that are really struggling for jobs. And so I think unleashing the social side of our entrepreneurism so that we are having more impact into all of our region, not just certain parts of the region could be improved.
I want to add to that because as you said that, what your question triggered for me was that what has been unleashed is a new way of thinking and a new dialogue and a new vocabulary. The term social entrepreneur gave me permission as an entrepreneur to try to grow, as opposed to any sort of growing was greed and capitalism was to me personally negative, as opposed to a lot of other people where that was where they got status and power and control. So having this new vocabulary, this new conversation that we're now publicly having, I think is unleashing.
Will you give a little clip about what your business is?
I own Rosetta's Kitchen, and I own a restaurant that's nearly across the street, right down there, for those of you who are out of town and want to go somewhere. And we just opened 3 weeks ago on UNCA's campus, and I had never been able to define social entrepreneur, social mission. I had just been doing it falling on accident because I needed to somehow survive, and I couldn't figure out how to do it while working for big yucky corporations and wanting to still look in the mirror every day. So I developed it, but then this new vocabulary, this new conversation is really stimulating to me. We also just released a wholesale brand in January. We now are selling our veggie burgers retail and wholesale, and we just opened at UNCA, which now is a replicable model.
If I could also expand on that concept a little bit about unleashing. We like to think of Asheville as sort of the central hub of this, but in this area of Western North Carolina, there are 23 counties that need to be included in this dialogue. And the thing about this sort of collaborative group that's coming together and talking about this now, we are still very few and far between when we examine the entire region. And this region in particular has a huge history of agribusiness, and what that means for us, me in particular, in my business in terms of unleashing impact, is I've got to get the dialogue going with farmers to let them know that their land is more valuable in producing crops than it is in selling it to real estate developers. And I think that unleashing impact means being inclusive of all of the members of this great community, as opposed to just this sort of exclusive group of people who already understand social entrepreneurship and what it means to be involved in those.
As I said, the Kaufman Foundation did one of the broadest analyses of venture capital returns to show pretty much a 0% rate of return over the last 10 years. And that's including firms that, like the Bain Capital, that just have the pick of the litter on a huge scale, are bloodthirsty, essentially grouped. To me, it would seem like adding a screen of impact investing and corporate responsibility would make your task for investors even more difficult. Do you think that advantages you or disadvantages you? And what kind of rate of return?
Well, we don't have, I know the Kaufman study. The last study that we did, Harvard McKinsey did a study on an IC portfolio. And obviously this goes from, 1991 to 2001. So obviously this is around the bubble time period. But IC's portfolio beat the S&P 500 and was slightly behind standard, traditional VC. So our members in that portfolio in that time period did really well. And obviously, with the 11 IPOs, 24 M&A deals, there is that idea that, that's kind of shifted. That was the IPO time period right now, so now we're out of that. But we're still seeing plenty of M&A activity in the sustainable foods, sustainable consumer products, in medical devices doing really well. So there's a lot of sectors where our members are still doing really well. So I think the impact just ends up, because they care about it, it ends up being something that they value and they get a good return as well. So VC is slightly different than angel. So when Kaufman's looking at VC and what their rate of return, angel investing is earlier, so there's more risk but potential for return.
I'd like to also comment on that in terms of lending. We have a default rate that is comparable or better in some communities than lenders who don't take as much risk. And I think one of the things that is real important to talk about is that when you invest in a company that, you know, where you have, that company has a community stake, you get to know that company, you care about that business, you work hand by hand with that business, it's hard for them to default on you. It's hard if they know you by name. It's hard if they know how important that, you know, the rest of the work of what you're doing is. So I think there's a conception out there that high-risk borrowers are not worth working with, and I think that it's very important to kind of look at, to compare the rate of people like Mountain BizWorks and Self-Help and other lenders as well in terms of default rate.
One other thing with that, just came to my mind is, so when VCs are looking at 30 companies in the same space doing the same thing and one will succeed in that space, the companies that we invest in are not competing. I mean, we look at companies that have a CEO who's passionate about what they're doing. They have a mission, they're mission driven, and they're doing something great in their local community, and then it scales. And that's not something that's being replicated by 30 other companies in the same thing in some social media space where that 29 out of 30 are going to fail, and that's what the VCs are going after.
Michael wanted.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say I've actually talked to some venture capital people about investing, and the problem that I've run into with them is that one of the reasons they have this 0% return is because they are all betting to hit the jackpot. They're all going for the 100 times return, and I'm never going to provide that. But for angel investors who have invested, and for people with other socially driven missions, the fact that we can actually get your money back with some interest, and we can show you the individual guys you're helping, for a lot of people, that's enough. And if you're not making the risky bets to try and be one of the early investors in Google, then you're going to fail less often, I guess. So you're going to have the catastrophic failure happen less often. And so, I think that for a lot of people, just having an impact without it being a donation is enough that they're not as worried about these venture capital type returns.
Well, in our deposit rates, I have to put my pitch in here, but our deposit rates are similar or better than most local places where you could deposit money. And what's important to me is that, we may not be able to offer the best auto loan rate. There's more risk, but we do have investors that choose to open a CD with us because the CD is a women and children CD, and it's going toward childcare, and it's going toward women-owned businesses, or it's a green CD that's going toward green business and building green business. And so what's interesting to me to find out is that there are investors out there, yes, they want to make a return, but they don't care if it's, as Michael was saying, a huge return. They care about the fact that they have this other return as well. So I think that's really
and sorry, just one more thing. I think that to answer the first, this is just really inspiring to me, because I think in answer to the first question earlier of what was leashing this before, nothing. I mean, you heard from someone who was doing it and just didn't know the word social entrepreneurship, and that's how we started as well. I think the difference now is that people are thinking about business not just in terms of like Wall Street wrecking the economy and an oil company wrecking the wolf. Like, it's often been like, business does this, and they're out to like maximize themselves, and it doesn't matter who gets burned, and then there's charity over here. And I think awakening consumers and people to say, does what this business works on every day have a social impact in the way that some of the other people have described it? I think that's the awakening that is happening and needs to happen more.
Yeah, we'll take 2 more questions, and then we've got lots of time to interact over at the loft at the ledge, so we're going to have food and beverages over there. But go ahead.
If it's okay for a mom to say something.
Yeah, mom can say something. From a mom to a mom, yes.
Well, raising 3 kids, public school kids born and raised in the mountains, I just would like to say how much the environment here hopefully informs everyone. Because you talk about people being drawn to this area, hopefully it awakens not only people who are born and raised here, but people who come in here
Stanford, MIT.
Oh, you're Eli's mom.
This is Eli's
Eli's
mom,
mom, okay.
who I mentioned earlier, who's helping out with Gritty Works.
Heading a human rights organization. These are boys born in the woods, and I just want to say, I think a lot of, and, you know, born in the woods. But I just want to say how important that always was to be grounded, literally grounded in a reality. If you cut this tree, this is what will grow or not grow. These are the resources. If you do this upstream, this is what happens to your water. And everybody doesn't have that luxury. But I just wanted to be a small voice to all of us, really opening our hearts to be educated by these mountains and by this land. Because a lot of the children I see coming out here, you say, what's in the water needs the county. I think it's that the land has informed them to be good stewards, even when they go out into the world into these companies. And I see it so much in this young man, this young man. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
The ability to bring people together like this, following similar activities, has the ability to catalyze more change than people expect. And I think investing in events is something that's often overlooked. And I think it can cause a lot of change.
Thank you for saying that, Corey. I appreciate that. So with that being said, I do want to thank the Aloft Hotel. They were our main sponsor of the event. They've sponsored beautiful event space, so we're inviting everyone to join us at the Ledge. So when you go to the Aloft, ask them for directions to the Ledge. It overlooks the beautiful Asheville skyline. So you're all invited there now, and you can. All of our speakers will be over there, and you can network with them. And there's light hors d'oeuvres and beverages over there. So please join us there. And thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate it.